Hey guys, Ridiculous Badger coming at you. Let's talk about what my predictions are for the upcoming tier change. We're coming up on T9, and one of the things that happens is everybody looks and sees, well, what ship am I going to skill into? What ship am I going to be seeing out there in space? And that's great, and that's very important. But one thing that doesn't get talked about so much at the public level is what shifts are going to happen at the alliance level. So it's a very different concept to build your own ship or your own small gang versus how these alliances choose what doctrine is. So what I would like to do is talk a little bit about what my predictions are for what some of the conversations that your alliance might be going through right now or might have already gone through to figure out what are going to be the new doctrine ships. So with T9, we're going to see the addition of some new Guardian ships. Those Guardian ships are the Battlecruiser Guardians. This might seem cut and dry because alliances right now are utilizing MOA 2 Guardians, and to some extent they're using Rupture 2 Guardians, although that's much more for a raiding application. That's not really the blob fleet doctrine, and what I want to talk about today is what those changes are to that blob fleet doctrine. So it might seem easy, just skill into the Battlecruiser, but the truth is that the battlecruiser doesn't really provide enough benefit, and it's not as much of a home run as, say, the MOA 2 Guardian is. The MOA 2 Guardian is great. It gets extra shield resistances. Shield resistances keep it alive on the battlefield. I know, again, people might say, well, the Rupture 2 Guardian gets extra shields, and that's true, but the reason that people utilize the Rupture 2 Guardian is not because it has more survivability than the MOA 2 Guardian, but it's because it has some more speed, and it's a little bit easier to get some damage off on it. So people utilize it for raiding purposes to move bubbles quickly, but when we're talking about big blob fleets, what we're talking about is survivability, and we're talking about you have to be able to maintain a moderate level of speed, something around the 1,000 meters per second to 1,500 meters per second. If you're there, you're great, you're gravy, because remember, everybody else has to be moving with you. The issue with the battle cruisers, however, is it's not so cut and dry when you go into their bonuses. So the Ferox gets extra shields, and really it would be between the Ferox Guardian and the Cyclone Guardian. Unfortunately, the Cyclone Guardian is off the menu for big blob fleets because its bonus is to shield booster amount. We don't use shield boosters to keep Guardians alive in blob fleets. What we do is we use Logi to do that. So the Cyclone Guardian is off the menu, really, because the Ferox has a much better bonus, which is shield amount. But the truth is that we don't really care so much even about shield amount. What we care about are resists, and we care about some speed, and the speed on the ship is not very good. It's not going to be able to keep up with some of the faster moving cruisers that people use for brawling, and when you want to reposition a fleet, that kind of thing could be important. MOA 2 Guardian is great because it provides an extra 20% of shield resists across the board if you have level 5 in its specific bonus. So people are going to keep using that. Now you could come and say, well, Badger, why not use the Ferox? It's got more shields, it's got more shield amount. But the truth is, we don't use individual ships for shield amount. We use Logi to keep ships alive. And what will happen is you'll just bring more MOA 2 Guardians, and if one goes down, if one shield goes down, another one puts their shield field up, and the battle continues. So unfortunately, the battle cruisers are not really going to move. Lately, Guardians have been moving towards Nightmares, and I guess people just have a ton of ISK to blow, and we've even been seeing this in big Alliance blob fleets. We've been seeing alliances that are fielding, 3, 4, 5, 6, and more Nightmares at a clip. So that might back off somewhat because there are going to be coming out some non-faction battleships on the field. Whereas right now, Nightmares are, and all the faction battleships are the pinnacles of battleship warfare. They're the pinnacles of ships on the field. They're still going to be the best ships on the field, but other battleships are going to be there that are a lot cheaper that could touch them. And because of that, people might decide to start taking their faction battleships off the field. I personally don't think we're going to necessarily see that. I think people love to spend money, so I think we'll keep seeing Nightmares based on the lack of decent incremental increases when going from the Moatu Guardian to the Ferox Guardian. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Ferox Guardians. I think the Moatu Guardian is going to keep being the blob fleet bubble of choice. Let's talk about snipers. Current snipers that Alliance blob fleets utilize right now are the Naga and the Tornado. It's going to be a simple incremental increase to go from the Naga to the Naga 2, from the Tornado towards the Tornado 2. Now this is going to be based on preference for what the Alliance wants to do, whether they're going to suggest going cannons or going rails. There are benefits and there are detriments to each one. A lot of fleet commanders were probably planning on going into the Roke, but unfortunately the Roke got moved back and now it's a T10 ship. We'll see some going into the Tempest, and the Tempest has great damage and it takes away some activation time, which is great. And that is one of the shortcomings with cannons and why some alliances have chosen railguns over cannons. Even though theoretically cannons, if you look on the math, have better damage application and they have better range, well, the rails have a much lower activation time. And one of the issues when you get into these big blob fleets is that everybody is attacking the same target, everybody alphas it, and you end up overkilling targets. So if you have a long activation time, it could be a long amount of time before you're actually ready to blap that next target once the first target gets overkilled. So because of that, rails are a little bit more versatile. The Rogue got taken off the menu, however, so we will see some Megathrons step into that. In addition, one ship that should be breaking out onto the sniper fleet meta in the Alliance doctrines is we're going to start seeing some Dominixes. Dominixes are great drone ships, and for a while, drone ships have been a little bit lackluster when it comes to the blob fleet. In the beginning of the game, your Vexor Navy issue was great. It was near the top of the meta for these blob fleets because it did have great range. Other ships stepped up to the plate to provide even more range than the Vexor Navy issue, and as a result of that, the drone ships kind of got left in the dust and relegated to a pseudo-brawler/escort. More on that later, but with the Dominix coming out, drones are going to be stepping again to the forefront. These things have incredible range, and we're going to see them in sniper fleets. One thing that drone pilots will have to be aware of here, however, is the fact that your drones will have to travel to the target. Unless you're using sentry drones have amazing range. Let's talk about your Workhorse Cruisers. The Cruisers are still going to be the workhorse of the blob fleets. However, their role is going to shift somewhat. Before, your Cruisers were primary damage applications. People used stabbers or SFIs, people used Vexors or VNIs because they had great range, better range than anything else out there. However, when battle cruisers came on the scene, we were able to apply some better ranges. The only thing keeping the cruisers in that front driver's seat for a very long time was the differential in cost. There's been a long time, people and alliances have gotten much richer. We're going to see more in the way of battle cruisers, and we're going to see more in the way of battleships out there applying damage, and applying that damage at great range. So because of that, cruisers are going to be shifting from primary damage application to an escort role. They're going to be escorting bubbles, shield field. And because of that, The VNIs and the SFIs, or the Omens of the world, are going to be shifting from more mid-range to short range. Their job will be protecting the bubble, protecting it against enemy frigates that come into the bubble or enemy drones that come into the bubble or close to it. The SFI is simply no longer as OP as it once was, and the more diverse fleet doctrine becomes, this trend is going to continue, and it won't matter as much which brawler or workhorse is used. With how robust sniper fleets are going to become, they're going to need more in the way of escorts than just the VNIs. So these stabbers, and even if you feel like bringing in, even Omens are going to be relegated more to close range brawling. And they're going to be relying on bigger guns to bring the alpha and to bring the range. And of course, they'll provide damage when battle cruisers and battleships aren't available to be on the scene. And possibly most important, they provide an entry point to new players in your alliances. Finally, that brings us to Logi. There's been one ship that has been the meta for Logi since, very early on, since T7, and that's been the Scythe. That's going to be changing over to the battle cruiser Logi, which is going to be the Hurricane logistics ship. Hurricane Logi brings a ton more in the way of slots, most notably mid-slots. And mid-slots are utilized in blob fleets to provide group cap and group shield. The Hurricane Logi having access to 5 mid-slots is huge here. It lets them diversify a little bit if they need to. It's not that much slower than the Scythe, and it's got a ton of high slots. Now, a few parting thoughts. The biggest concern in all of this is that the ships that are going to be leveraged in alliance doctrines moving forward for T9 are going to start seeing a spreading out of the differences for their optimals and their fall-offs, and also their speed. So FCs are going to need to understand intimately the differences between the different ships, how to group them up in squads, what their optimals and fall-offs are going to be, and what their speed differences are going to be. It's going to be very important for FCs to understand how to keep these ships grouped together inside their shield fields, and people who understand that are going to excel as FCs. Another major concern is that with the advent of battleships and with the level 2 battle cruisers coming out, there's going to be a lot of extra alpha on the field, and Guardians don't really look like they're changing all that much, right? It looks like MOA2 Guardians are going to continue to be the mainstay. And because Guardians aren't going to be changing that much, so defense isn't going to be changing that much. However, there's a lot more alpha on the field, a lot more damage on the field. It's going to become much, much more important to think ahead of time as an alliance and figure out which ships should be using which group mods and which squads should they be in order to keep the capacitor alive of the Logi and in order to keep the shields alive of the Guardians. Thanks for joining me, and good luck in the next tier.